Okay, I make it 10 o'clock my time, which is 9 o'clock for most of you, so let's get underway. Welcome everyone to Shaping Demand. Let me perhaps start by giving a little bit of background. As I said, there will be Q&A at the end, so feel free to signal topics of specific interest to you. What are we going to be talking about? Well, some of the tough realities in the current marketplace. Why did this topic come about? I guess some of you will know if you've been to some of the master classes or the events in London that I've been talking for a few years about the necessity to go beyond being a service provider. Life is tough for service providers. It's a constant battle to get clients to pay attention, to get clients to follow recommendations, to get clients in the first place. And for many people, they found that it's necessary to think beyond being a service provider. That mindset can limit many professionals in their professional careers. And we used to use different words for this, trusted advisor, trusted authority. And then this, in 1 week, in I think it was middle of 2012, about 5 people from different countries, Sweden, the UK, Belgium, and whatever, sent me a link to some research that had just been published earlier last year, which added a lot of weight to this research, which we will cover in summary on this call. What we're talking about is going beyond the conventional selling. And although I was originally coming at this from pricing and from the mindset that actually creates really good business development, as we'll see, it has specific application to sales. And I really like this term shaping demand, which Kathy uses. So I've invited Kathy Bennett to join us on the call. I'll be introducing Kathy in just a few minutes. Let's begin with a little bit of information about you. So if you would, what I would like to ask you is not so much about you as your primary customers. Who are they? Are they end consumers? In other words, are the people who buy your services also the people who actually use them, as would be the case for many personal coaches, for example, or people who work in the one-on-one field? Or are they instead, are they large multinationals, or are they in the public sector? Where are your primary customers? I appreciate you may have customers that span different sectors. Many people do. But the chances are your primary customers, or those that you really want to have, fall into one or other of these sectors. We are, of course, limited to 5, so I cannot do more than that. Okay. There are people still voting. There are people still arriving and voting. If you have just arrived, welcome. Where are your primary customers? So as roughly 2/3 of people have voted so far, let's just wait for a few more. I mean, numerically, this is already reasonably statistically significant. So I think we'll pause there. While you're voting, can I just take a moment, as people are still arriving, to say I'm joined on the call by Kathy Bennett. I'll be introducing Kathy in more detail in a moment. Kathy works with sales teams to accelerate the results that they're getting, and I'll be saying a bit more about why I invited Kathy onto this particular forum later in the call. Right, that's enough time. Let's close the poll and see who we are on the call. Share results. Here we go. You should be seeing a screen in front of you that says that 14% of you do sell to the end consumers. Just half, exactly half of you, are selling to small or medium-sized businesses or owner-managed businesses where you stand a fighting chance of getting at the decision maker. 1/4 of you are selling to large multinationals. A significant enough 11% are dealing with the public sector. That will be interesting. And absolutely nobody dealing with non-profits. That's, I should probably have used that for another heading. Interesting mix of people. Clearly the majority are selling to businesses, whether small or large. significant fact on this call. So if we look at what conventional selling in B2B has been all about, it's been very much about relationship building. The theory is that you get to know your client, they learn to trust you so much, they pour their heart out, you then meet their requirements, you provide a really good, comprehensive solution for them, and where possible you make sure your offer is better than everyone else's. That's been the approach, you know, whatever it's been, whether it's spin or consultative selling or solution selling, but that relationship building approach has been the dominant school of sales, shall we say, for probably at least 30 years. However, there are a few problems with that in the current environment. Top of the list for many of you is that where in the past you were dealing with one decision maker, many of us are now having to deal with multiple decision makers, and we don't stand a chance to build a relationship with everyone. Some call it the whole of board buy-in problem, others call it consensus selling, but whatever it is, we are often, as procurement has tightened up, it's just getting harder to release budgets, and companies are making it harder to release budgets, precisely to protect themselves from relationship building scenarios where people give jobs to their friends. Secondly, as Kathy will cover in significant detail in a few minutes, buyers are becoming more sophisticated, or at least they believe they are. One of the interesting statistics here that I've come across elsewhere is that the salaries paid to purchasing professionals is consistently growing ahead of the salaries paid to equivalent professionals in other functions. So people are paying more to those who look after their purchasing. They're therefore attracting a higher caliber of people in the purchasing arena who know the market. And therefore, and particularly if somebody comes in front of them as a service provider, all of these forces create commoditization, which is a big, long, fancy word for being asked to do more for less all the time. It happens in every marketplace. It's happened with it's happened in the legal sector with conveyancing. It's happened in accounting. It's happened in just about every different set. Training, of course, enormously so since e-learning has hit the scene. And all of this creates a climate where it's often safer to postpone the purchase than to actually make the decision and go do it. Because these sophisticated buyers know there are better things around the if they wait another while, they know there'll be another option. And you know, unlike, as Kathy will illustrate shortly, unlike the traditional environment where the sellers were educating the buyers, this is less and less true. So well, this started in 2008, but as I say, I only came across it last year. A corporate executive board started some research, initially with about 500 sales professionals, which they've then extended to 6,000. They've distinguished roughly 5 groups who, by and large, in terms of average performance, are all equally effective. And I'm putting those 5 groups in front of you. The first group you'll recognize immediately as the relationship builders. The second group are those who do more calls, more sales activity, more visits. They genuinely believe if you work the quantity, the quality will follow. The third group will be familiar to anyone who's ever worked in sales, particularly anyone who's ever tried to manage salespeople. These are the lone wolves. These are those who are very hard to manage. Out they go. They do their own thing, and nobody is quite sure how they spend their day. The fourth group are probably those who really should be in customer service. They've mistaken their vocation along the way. They've solved problems for clients long after they should even be solving them. They're so motivated by service. Clients love them, of course. The problem is the risk is that they have difficulty closing. And finally, there is this group called the challengers. And this group became rather significant when they started to contrast average performance in sales teams with the real top performers. As I said earlier, all the groups were roughly equally represented in terms of average performance. But when we start looking at the top performers, surprise, surprise, and they weren't, you know, they didn't expect this conclusion. Surprise, surprise, the challengers come out massively on top. So those who are pushing their clients, who are taking control of the conversation, who are not necessarily responding to requirements, but changing them and shaping them and pushing back. These are the people who tend to close in B2B sales. And the second group, interestingly, were the lone wolves, whom nobody is quite sure what they do, but these two were in the top performing brackets. And perhaps most significantly, the gap got bigger with the complexity of the sale, which I tried to represent in that diagram there somewhat crudely. But in high complex sales, in other words, where there's more consensus buying, where there's lots of stakeholders involved, and sometimes, of course, where the numbers are higher as well, but not necessarily. The challengers were the challengers, and interestingly, the hard workers. The challengers and lone wolves. Again, lone wolves roughly the same 25%, but the challengers were massively they were more represented in that group than one might expect. So, is this true with SMEs? One of the questions that is coming in. We statistically don't know. In fact, I didn't have any of these statistics until last year. Anecdotally, even more true with SMEs, because if you are working with, particularly for those who have grown up in a service mindset, some of what we're talking about on this call will be quite a big departure. Instead of going out to SMEs with a cap in hand, what can we do for you, we're going to have to think about going out, particularly in the current climate, with a different tone. Right. At this point, I am going to take a bungee jump with technology. I'm going to hand over to Kathy. As I said while I'm handing over, Kathy is an expert in working with teams of salespeople to accelerate their performance. The sectors that she's working in are quite wide and varied. You should, all going well, be seeing her photograph in front of you. Kathy, over to you.
Thank you very much, John. Hopefully you can hear me loud and clear too. Thank you also, John, for the opportunity to work together with you to share our thinking on this subject, which as you know, and you've already mentioned, I'm really, really passionate about, particularly because of what's happening in the marketplace for B2B sales. And thank you to everybody who's joined us this morning and put aside time out of busy schedules. So why demand shaping? Well, John's already talked about some of the reasons why we've chosen to talk about it today. For example, how competitive it is, how traditional methods aren't necessarily working out there right now. And it's not just difficult for us. Your buyers are under pressure too. They've got to find solutions to problems they're facing, and they've got many of those. They're also swamped with information, but they haven't necessarily got the budgets to resolve them. So today, as John said, is all about the need to go beyond meeting demand, because the methods of 5 to 10 years ago, and probably even 2 to 3 years ago, aren't necessarily working anymore. So to get ahead of your competition, you're going to need to work with your customers to actually shape demand. Now, the way that people in the business-to-business sector are buying is changing fundamentally too. So what I'd like to do is a quick poll on how your buyers want to engage with you in the market of today. So that's great. So I think we've got that poll up there now, which is what percentage of business-to-business buyers want to interact and engage with prospective suppliers, that's people just like you, using social media. Now, let me be clear, this is not a session on social media. But as we talk more about shaping demand, we'll see that it actually has a strong part to play in it. And more importantly, this poll will tell you a bit more about what your customers are doing right now and how they're thinking. So if you could place your votes now, do you think it's the minority of people that want to engage in that way? Is it more like half of your buyers? Or perhaps more of them, 3/4, or even the majority, over 80%? That want to engage with you and interact with you using social media. How are we doing on those votes, John?
We've got over 80% voted, so I think we can close it there.
Yep.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1 for the indecisive. Okay, that's enough. I'm going to close the poll. I might have to check back as presenter, Kathy, just to share the results.
Yes, I think you do, yeah. That's fine.
Let me just do that. If I can do that, you'll probably see some screens flying around here, but bear with me. And
we wanted to make this complex, didn't we, John?
Yeah, we certainly succeeded. So here we go. Share.
Fantastic.
I am now sharing results. You should be seeing the poll results.
And that's really interesting, and I suppose not surprising in terms of the results, that 79%, as you can see, so the vast majority of the people on this call think that business-to-business buyers don't actually want to engage with you using social media, that social media isn't a key thing in the way they buy, the way they go to market, and the way they operate. 3% think it's more than 80%, and a similar 3% more than 75%, and just 16% if you think it's 50%. So the feeling in the group here is that business-to-business buyers don't want to engage with their prospective suppliers using social media. Well, actually, some research that was done showed that 85% of buyers in business-to-business, 85% want you to engage with them on social media. Surprising. That's the fact. That's the research done across a large amount of forums. So where B2C led on social media, now business to business is actually leading. So moving on, are you going to just change? Yeah, can you just change me over back to presenter, please, John?
I have. I already have. You should be the presenter.
You need to shut the poll down.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Please. Thank you.
My favorite mistake.
I've still got the results up. I think people are still seeing the results.
Yeah. Thank you.
They'll probably be shouting loud and clear. There we go. And put me. Just waiting.
You are presenter now. If you just move to the next slide, it should come up.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So what else is changing? Because that's a significant change, and a significant change obviously from those poll results for the people listening in. Well, it used to be that marketing generated the leads, sales closed them. But now the boundaries are blurred, and actually the way customers want to interact with you is driving that. Customers used to have to ask salespeople for information. John talked about this earlier. And as a result, sales were the recognised experts. And when I say sales, even if you've not got a sales team, that's anybody who is actually involved in providing or presenting their services to their buyers or their customers.
Sorry to interrupt, Kathy. Sorry to interrupt. We're getting messages that we don't see your next slide, and I don't either. Can you just change slides?
No, right. Yeah, let me just try. Thank you.
All right, let me just change presenter and change presenter back.
Yeah, just do it again, because thank you.
Okay, here we go. Thank you, folks. This is where the question box gets really handy.
Thank you very much. So now you're now presenter. You need to switch it back to me.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
There we go. Good.
Let me just. I'll just quickly run back through that. So you can people now see that slide with what's changed, the old and new world? Yep. Great. Sorry about that. So as I say, it was marketing used to lead with generating sales and sales closed them. Now the boundaries are blurred. Customers used to have to ask salespeople for information. Sales were experts. So they used to be able to lead their customers through the sales process. With the advent of the World Wide Web in 1991, I think it was, and the digital explosion in the first decade of the century, which we've all seen, customers can get the information they need from many forums, and they can go on and just put the questions in and get the answers at the press of a button. This is the sophistication that John mentioned earlier, and this is leading to sales expertise transferring to buyers. And remember, they can apply the knowledge they gain to their own business and requirements. So buyers are now leading where before sales led. It's a big change. So what impact does this have on the process? And remember that part of what we're trying to talk about today is how you can get ahead of the competition. So let's have a look at where that opportunity might lie. If you look at a traditional sales process like you can see now on the screen, it starts off with you needing to identify the prospect. And by the way, I'm assuming you've got a defined sales process in your business. And maybe if you have or haven't, that's something we can talk about more in the question and answer session. So you start off identifying the prospect, do a bit of homework, find out what their problem is by usually engaging with them, present some options, negotiate, and hopefully are successful then in selling. If you then look at it from the customer's perspective, you can see that they start almost 2 steps ahead of you. By the time you're working to clarify their problem, they are looking at options from potential suppliers, the competition. So how have they got ahead? Well, remember, in the digital age, they've already got a lot of that information, if not all of it. Most people are doing that research in advance of even having the problem. So the thing that a lot of us just don't realise or maybe take into account is that customers don't need sales in the awareness stage like they used to.
Can I pause there, Kathy? We're getting a few questions in that relate to the, if you like, the previous slide, although I'd suggest keep this slide up. Some people are wondering what the evidence is for this. Others are saying, doesn't it depend on the industry? Still others are, just expressing surprise that over 80% want to engage via social media in the B2B space. Can you comment further on that?
Yes, I mean the research that was done was a collection of, on the social media piece, the 85% was a collection of information put together by a marketing agency in London, a very reputable one called Earnest, and they used a variety of sources, and actually I've got the link, they did a great infographic on it, which has got lots of other statistics around it as well. They call it vital statistics for B2B marketeers actually, but that's one of the reasons why I say marketing and sales are coming ever closer together. So that we could possibly provide that, but that's where that information comes from.
One thing that's definitely cropping up a lot in my experience is that buyers are getting younger. maybe it's just an angle over.
Yeah, I was going to say.
as in the B2B market space, a lot of the buyers that we're dealing with will be under 40 and in many cases under 30. So they have grown up with social media to a degree that perhaps older people have not.
It's an interesting research I saw on that as well. I think you're absolutely right, but looking at some research, I think it was CEO.com, and I'm not quite sure where it came from, but they were looking at research, and it said that CEOs, young and old alike, really tend to use LinkedIn a lot. Yeah. So there's quite a lot of research and data around it, so we can provide that.
Well, I'm going to stop interrupting you at this, but one last comment from Graham is it would be helpful to understand what is meant by customers want to engage on social media.
Yeah, I think we're going to talk about that in a moment when I start to talk about some of the tips for how you can shape demand, John, and Graham as well. So perhaps if we could move on, and then if that's still a question, and if we don't get time, because we do need to move on because time is moving on, that maybe we can respond to some of these afterwards, perhaps via email if that's going to be suitable. But let's try and move on, and so we can answer as many of these on the call as possible. And Graham, if that doesn't get answered as we move forward, then re-raise it, please. Okay. So let's move on to the next bit. Let's have a quick look at it from the customer's point of view. This is really just to underline what we've already talked about. So if you look at the sales pipeline from the customer's perspective, stages 1, 2, and 3, they're gaining awareness, becoming familiar with the suppliers out there, assessing their uniqueness, and they're doing a lot of it on their own through the channels that we talked about. So by the time you get to stage 4, where there's purchase intent, so there's a stated need, and remember we've talked about meeting and shaping needs and demand, it becomes all about challenging. At stage 4, it becomes about challenging the client's thinking and then reframing their requirements, which is also very important. And John's going to be talking a bit more about that in a moment. Now, the sort of market experience and our experience and feedback from the market shows that normally about 5% of your customers will probably be at stage 4 at any one time. So that means that 95%, or even if it's 85%, won't yet be at stage 4. So the point being is that it's in stages 1 to 3 that you can actually shape demand. And we're going to look at how you can do that now. So we're going to go through sort of 4 steps really here to move from meeting to shaping demand. The first one is how you synchronize with your buyers. As that actually slide doesn't look like that slide's moved on.
Yeah, moved on for me. It has for me. I'm seeing from meeting. Yeah.
Good. So we're going to look at how you can synchronize with your buyers, having looked at those processes, and then listening in and learning what's top of their agenda. Using this information to share information that adds value to them to gain their trust and allow you to get access to those people. And then once you're in with the customer, it's all about challenging their thinking to reframe their requirements and put you one step further ahead of the competition. So, how much do you know about how your customers buy, what they buy, why they buy it? That's the first step in terms of synchronizing or aligning with your buyers. So here are some quick tips for understanding the buying process better so that you can synchronize with it. Close the customer buying circle by involving marketing. Do research with people. Work in partnership with your customers. Do projects that mix buyers together and look at what your competition are doing. I'd just like to relate these to a project we did recently with a customer because I think it'll give you a better feel or a real feel for how this might work. We did a project with a customer who sells building services to the retail and both and entertainment and leisure sectors. So sort of think of high street, flagship high street stores. We met a cross-section of people across the business to kickstart the project, sales, operations, customer service, etc. But we quickly realised there wasn't enough information to understand fully how, what and why their customers buy. We also talked to people in the business who'd worked for key competitors, and that was really interesting. We got some really interesting information from that. But because the information wasn't really in the business, we did a short survey with a cross-section of customers to get that information. And that wasn't just the ones where they were working really well together, but also ones that were at risk of being lost. What it did was it allowed us to identify key triggers in their process to understand how and what they were buying. And some of the key triggers in their process, one example which was critical, was protecting the brand image. Bear in mind this is flagship stores or these high-end leisure sector businesses. Understanding their customers' process in this way, with feedback from their customers, enabled them to initiate contact at the right time and with the right information in the right way. And the result was that new accounts, they've won some new accounts, they've recently won new accounts, but they've also secured their current customers for the future. So next step is, where do you start this conversation and how do you start it? And one thing that's key here, so this is the second step, listen and learn with your customers. It's all about early and proactive engagement. And the conversation actually starts with you listening, not talking. It's about finding out about their pain points, which John mentioned earlier. So sort of ask yourself the question, what is the one thing, if your customers could answer it, it would make the biggest difference to them right now? Now, there's no definite answer as to when you should start doing this. So the advice or the recommendation would be do it early, do it frequently or regularly, and at trigger points. For example, I notice that some people will do business with people in the public sector where a lot of it's done through tender. So if you've got tender renewal coming up, if it's a year ahead, you certainly need to be listening in there, and I would say before then, to understand what's happening in the marketplace. Some of the forums you can use to listen and learn, social media, it's put up there again, I've just mentioned LinkedIn, hashtag searches, but there's lots of other things apart from social media. Joining industry groups and forums, reading trade press. It might not be trade press even, it might be national press, the FT for example. Have our business review for example. Attending exhibitions for your industry and sector, and also researching their press releases and possibly the values that they work to so that you can listen and learn about those. So an example I had recently was an associate who attended a logistics event a couple of months ago, which sort of brought a lot of this together under one roof. Now, he had a few meetings planned for the exhibition, but he did know a lot of his target customers would be there. So what did he get from it, from turning up to an exhibition for one day? Well, he felt the energy of the industry and its readiness to move on from recession, because you'll notice on the point 5 on the left I've said test readiness. Why now? This industry was really, really gripped by the recession back in 2008 and hit very early. And what you could tell was that the business had really moved on since the last exhibition 3 years ago. He saw key industry developments and learned what was hot, and he understood who was leading in the various markets and subsectors. Interestingly, he also got several leads where he could maybe add value and take that to business, and one possible project, all from one day at an exhibition.
I love that question, Kathy, why now? As opposed to why do you want to do it? Why do you want to do it now? It can be asked both as a fact find, but it can also be asked in a slightly interrogative, challenging way. Really love that question.
Yeah. And it was just a feel of it at that exhibition. What he was saying to me is that he could feel that the business was ready. The feel, and then the things he was hearing at the exhibition, what people were saying, they had lots of new developments. So now let's move on to where the real meat of shaping demand comes in, because you've done your homework by listening. So you've got a good idea by now of what your customers want to know more about. And hopefully you can think of examples in your own business where you could use this. By sharing that information, you can give them a reason to want to listen to you first. You have to get headspace with these people out there. They are so busy. There's so much information. And get them to be prepared to spend that valuable time of theirs with you. Then when you can deliver tangible value first, before you even get to stage 4, where there's a purchase intent and the start of the traditional sales funnel, that's where you can create trust and open them up to connecting with you and having a direct conversation, and hopefully maybe meeting with you. Above all, doing that ahead of your competition. Because remember, again, you're not into the traditional sales funnel at that stage. There's not necessarily a stated need. It's worth noting as well that many prospects with genuine business issues fail to actually solve their problem actively. We tend to think if we don't get the deal, then somebody else has. But there's a good chance now that it could be nobody, because buyers often haven't recognized the problem or appreciated its impact, or perhaps it's unanticipated, it's come out of the blue. Often they don't think there's a viable solution out there, and as John said earlier, there's risk aversion. The cost of changing is just too great, so they stick with status quo. And Forrester did some research that said 65% of executive buyers, so people in the B2B space, prefer to buy from a company that first helps them establish the buying vision, which is all about defining the problem and demonstrating that it can be solved, often in areas that they haven't previously looked at. So let's move on, because I can see time is moving on. So share. So I've got some tips here about how you can share information and what you can share. So I've started off with providing challenging insights to help uncover problems. Now, challenging, or another word for these, is disruptive insights, which I quite like because they rock the status quo of industry solutions and also buyer thinking. John talked earlier about the research on the salespeople and the type that were most successful, and the surprising outcome of the challenger salespeople leading the pack in high performance. How many people do you know who still use the relationship seller model? That's a challenging or disruptive insight that we use frequently in our business when we're talking about how people should be coaching and training their salespeople. One of the common problems, because one I've put down there is use case studies to show there's a viable solution, which we talked about being something that often stops people moving forward with a sale, is they don't think there's a viable solution out there. One of the common problems we hear a lot about is that companies are finding it hard to crystallize their value proposition, so what they offer to their customers, and also to get their salespeople to consistently tell the story so that they can retain and win sales. Well, we were called to work with a company in the materials handling sector because they had no clear definition of what their brand meant to the customer, and the sales team were unable to articulate it consistently. So we brought contracts, marketing and sales together in a series of think tanks tasked with getting some great ideas out, and we got great ideas from it, and also buy-in to the customer value proposition because they put it together, and some key unique selling points. We added in training to increase the sales team confidence and capability, because that's actually really important in shaping demand. You're asking people to do something differently, so it's really important that you give them the confidence first as well as the capability to actually do it. This was instrumental in making this company one of today's market leaders in that sector, because they were actually able to clearly demonstrate why their customers should come and buy from them. It also shows, this example there, how one piece of content, like a case study here, can be used in many ways through a blog, even direct mail. So this doesn't have to be time-consuming or labour-intensive. Also, looking at the Challenger sale, for example, it doesn't have to be all your information. It can be people that you work in partnership with. It can be information you get off, off your sector. Any information that helps buyers identify their problem and the solution is going to be the sort of information you want to share.
I find that last point, pitfalls, really compelling. If you can share pitfalls, ideally, that others are falling into, in a very tailored, specific way, I find that really does grab attention. Nobody wants to fall into a pitfall.
Yeah, absolutely. And also using, if you've got buyers who decide they want to go and try and do it themselves, is to share, pitfalls of where they might run into difficulty and where they might want to contact you again if it isn't running as smoothly as they would like when they try to do it themselves. That's already a bit further down into the funnel, but that's before you've got a sale. So let's just move on, if we're okay to do that, John.
Yep.
We haven't got any challenging questions coming in?
All clear so far. They're
good stuff. Okay, good. I'm going to move on reasonably quickly here because a lot of what we've talked about across listen and learn, share and into add value, hopefully you're seeing that there's some common factors. Some of the information you've got that you'll have heard about and that you've got within your business can fall into, you can use it across these areas. Adding value is all about giving something first before you start asking for something from your customers. So valuable, useful information, things you're finding, what you're finding is working out there in today's market, developing an offering that solves problems that key target businesses are facing. I mean, again, one of the things we use here is a questionnaire for customers. So we share that with potential customers as well as existing customers on projects to help them understand what their value proposition is and also to align their activities and process to the buying process. And we're finding that's really giving people value out there in the market. And then it's on to getting access, which is the tricky bit really. But if you've done all of the things we've talked about beforehand, people should almost be wanting to connect with you. And this is where you can use a number of different ways to initiate contact. For example, customer news. If you see in the trade press or on a forum that they've had a major tender win, what better way than to pick up the phone or to send an email, ideally pick the phone up, or to perhaps connect via LinkedIn to bring you closer together. We've got a customer we're working with at the moment who's in the lighting sector business. It's a high-end part of the lighting sector, and they have a very complex sales process because it involves many different decision makers through the process. You've got sort of influencers, you've got architects, you've got specifiers, contractors, and across all of those you've got the end user. They use LinkedIn a lot to get the depth and breadth of connection with potential clients to gain access. And it was interesting because John was talking earlier about consensus buying, and that's how one way you can build a relationship with everybody in the process. Just last week, the sales director in that business connected with a firm of architects who he'd seen, who they weren't in contact with, but they did the sort of projects that they were ideally suited to. Used it to make contact, and that then allowed them to make a meeting, and they had a very productive meeting just last week with the key decision makers, and there are clearly opportunities to do business with that firm of architects. So that's where we sort of bring to a close, because hopefully at that stage, once you've got access, you're into the sales process and you're making contact, and then it's time to challenge. So really, that's where I'd like to hand over to John now to talk a little bit more about that.
Just while I'm flicking across, the other method that I see work really well in terms of gaining access is research. Time and time again, the sheer simplicity of going out with a really tailored question to a marketplace. You know, we know that, like many others, you must be dealing with issues of X, Y, Z, regulation change, etc., whatever it might be. How is it, how are you dealing with that? From what we're seeing, these seem to be the issues. What for you are the issues? Just anything that actually helps us to tailor our own insights and gain access at the same time. This allows the challengers to open up meetings in ways that perhaps they wouldn't have 10 years ago. So rather than going in with, how can I help you? Or, what's your strategy? Or whatever, rather than going in with a blank sheet of paper, which was the favorite approach for quite a few years, this is much more about going in with, you're practically informing them of what they already know. And it produces that response that Graham Kennedy, that lovely line that Graham has, and I know Graham is on the call today, which is where the buyer sits back and says, I see you know our world. Very, that's the entree that builds credibility. Then they're more likely to contribute. Then you can prioritize objectives together. And the point here is to make them think, rather than perhaps you're not necessarily seeking enthusiasm at this stage. You're actually more likely to be seeking a furrowed brow. How will you do that? Well, there's many ways. There's simply 3 here, but you could discuss something else as a prelude to the meeting. You could add something on an agenda, perhaps with an existing customer that isn't already on the agenda. You might change the order in which you tackle things. You might add a dimension, that extra dimension of security or operational efficiency. A superb example from yesterday, a company who are selling, amongst other things, reduced cost of insurance. And they found that actually what they need to be shifting that towards is better risk management. Because there will be a more engaging conversation with the client if it's about risk management than if it's simply about reducing insurance cost. That was a very good example of reframing. There's as many ways to do it as the imagination permits. Let's suppose that as a result of that, you generate a very, very enthusiastic first meeting. You've got a very keen buyer in front of you. They're embracing your insights. They're going, God, that's wonderful. Need to get other board members involved in this, etc., etc. What do you do next? This is a question for you, says he, trying to find the poll that it relates to. Yep, here we go. Launch. You should be seeing those 4 options appearing in front of you in the form of a poll. Do you offer to give them, to send them a proposal? Do you outline a choice of some kind? Do you ask them about their budget? What do you do next? Some people are thinking. 44% have voted. Are you getting into the buying mechanics, or are you outlining approaches and pitfalls? Well, clearly, a goodly number are listening to the subplot here. I'm about to close the poll as 79% have voted, and that will do me. So close and share. You should be seeing, I'm hoping you're seeing, a screen that has the poll results. And indeed, what we want to be focusing on here is not the choice of solution, but instead the choice of approach, as a good 71% of you are onto already. The debate you don't want as a challenger is, are we right for you? The debate you do want as a challenger is, which approach is best for you? Because if you can move the debate onto choice of approach rather than choice of solution, you are onto a much more fertile ground. They're also more likely to trust you, or at least you'll find out if they don't. Colin has an interesting question about connecting on LinkedIn. We'll come back to that in the end, Colin. Let me just, we're assuming that you're in this first conversation now, or maybe second or third conversation. And what we're focusing attention on is how you play the game as a challenger in that conversation. And the suggestion here is to focus more on choice of approach rather than choice of solution. So here are the key distinctions. First one already covered. What we want to do, actually, is to change it. Even if they put a very specific requirement in front of you, your primary goal is to tweak that, maybe not drastically, but to tweak it, rather than rush to meet their requirements. This is the reframing skill that Kathy alluded to earlier. And in doing so, you want to be working with them rather than for them. Again, many of you will know that distinction. It's been covered on these fora many times. If you're going to involve the budget holder, find an approach-centered reason for that, rather than just because they're the budget holder. You know, if you're seen to be just exploring their buying mechanics, well, that might be good sales, but it does somewhat diminish you in their eyes. What they really want you to be doing is in getting involved with them to define the best approach to success. What we're aiming for here is not enthusiasm, as I said at the outset, it's for new insight. Why? Because as it's covered quite a bit in one of the, there's been quite a few books on this corporate executive research. Probably the best known one's called The Challenger Sale by a guy called Matt Dixon and somebody else. And as they really underline in the book, challengers teach and educate their clients. And they do it in a tailored way. They're not just going out with the same 3 generic messages. They're actually tailoring specific distinctions, as in the example earlier, from costs of insurance across to risk management. Quick check on time. And in doing so, this isn't covered in the book, but it's one of the things that I find from working with practitioners on it. They displace their competition because they change the game. So I've worked with a team in the technology sector who had to bid for a job at a major bank. They were, at best, 3rd in the race. They displaced the other 2 by changing the game. They didn't so much produce a better tender or produce a better offer. They actually changed the game entirely, which knocked out the incumbent plus 1 other. This isn't about arguing or debate or being clever or outsmart, and it definitely is not about a clash of ego. What this is about, it's about really offering value. Why? In any of the ways listed there, whether it's the pitfalls and the landmines, whether it's providing new means to tackle tough problems, there's so many ways in which we can do more for our clients than just servicing their requests. If we can help bring them to better requests, we will actually produce more value with them. There are, of course, times when clients don't appreciate challenge, and probably, you know, watching the time today, I don't know if we'll have too much time to go into that, but probably the principal one is if they suspect that you're just looking for more work or you just want to expand the scope, then they will lock you down really fast. Or if they've already explained it to you before, or there is a time element here. If something needs to be done urgently, then of course we have to attend to the more immediate needs first. Sensitivity is needed here. We're not suggesting that challenge is always going to be appropriate. In fact, the more I work with people in this challenging approach, I'm kind of worried about the term challenging itself. I'm not altogether sure that challenging is precisely the best word. Sometimes that comes with a lot of fighting imagery, and this is not what we're doing. We're not necessarily fighting the client. Can be, sometimes. But we're more likely to be reporting observations from the marketplace than making judgments of them. This isn't a ticket for arrogance. Unfortunately, it can be used that way. And there's a price to be paid for that. Because if clients find that I worked with a law firm here in town, and the previous person who worked with them was just perceived to be arrogant. They booted him out. Why? Because he made great points, all right, but it was his ego was center stage. And even for this law firm, then that was a bridge too far. So we do all the time have to relate this to their agenda. I'm getting a question for Roger that I don't understand that says, how many approaches? I'm not altogether sure what the question means, Roger. Can you elaborate a little bit on that? This, of course, and the work that you've just been hearing from Kathy on social media, of course it triggers the question, when on earth am I going to find time for all this? I bet you get that question as well, Kathy.
I do, definitely.
Kathy's already referred to going to where your clients are in clusters, perhaps by speaking at conferences rather than networking at the conference. But more and more start looking for these specialist B2B platforms. They could be LinkedIn groups. They could be very private LinkedIn groups that are not necessarily trying to find members. The simplest way of doing it is ask your clients, where are they active? If they're not active on LinkedIn, forget everything we just said. If they're not active on social media, forget everything we just said. But tomorrow's buyer will be different. You can start to use your research and start to use your insights here to challenge readers. And again, careful with the challenge. Let's say to tailor some insights for them that they would find useful. The challenging will happen as a result. And of
John,
course,
if I could just
sure.
come in there, a lot of this that we're talking about doing and finding time for is actually what you can do as part of the demand shape. We talked about the listening and learning, where you can tailor it and then sharing that information across the various platforms.
Yeah, very true. Now, I'd like to demonstrate, rather than just talk about it here, let's just walk the talk a little bit. Part of what we're attempting to do right now is to get an inventory of the key conversations needed here, whether they're those who arise out of LinkedIn or whether they're those who are carried out face-to-face. So forgetting at the moment whether they're digital conversations or whether they're face-to-face conversations. Quick poll, if I may, says he, trying to click on the right button. There's actually two polls. The first of them is, which of these particular conversations are most relevant for you? By the way, you can tick multiples here. It's not just tick one. So is it the gaining access problem, i.e. the very question mentioned earlier about how do you bridge from a LinkedIn conversation through to a face-to-face conversation? Is it more about what we're covering today, what you're doing when you're in front of clients? Is it the fee bit? Is it the discussing the money, the budgets, the resources, who has them, etc.? Is it more about asking for any of the things we've just been talking about, introductions, meetings, referrals, questions? Is it the asking skills that gets us those meetings in the first place? Or is it those specific conversations that tend to apply in alliances and in partnerships with others? Again, please tick the ones that have the most relevance for you, and you're not confined to only one here. I'll give you a bit of time to do that, because it gives me a chance to read the questions. Roger, yeah, thanks, Roger. You mentioned presenting a choice of approaches. I was wondering if you could present too many. Good point. Kathy, what do you think? Is it possible sometimes to present too many approaches?
I think that, again, because your customers have this information overload, it's kind of a case of less is more, really. One of the traditional, very old techniques we teach sales teams is to do an alternative close with, say, 2 or 3 choices. And I think that the background behind that still holds true today when you're talking to your customers about choices. I think if you start presenting more than 3, it becomes very difficult for them to make a choice. As buyers are often unable to make a decision, we've already sort of talked about that, so I think you need to enable them to make that decision. Then maybe if you give them 2 or 3 choices and they've made a choice in that, maybe then you could probe within that choice that they've made and ask, maybe give them another 2 or 3 choices within that, if that makes sense. So yes, I think definitely restrict your choices and take it down a process of defining it more clearly.
Yeah, there's also people asking about slides. Don't worry, we'll send you those. You can see in front of you that it's the gaining access discussions that are of most concern to the people here. Thank you for that. Let me just follow up with the second set of questions. Once you're in front of them, once you're actually working together with them, which of these conversations are most significant? Now, this there are actually more than 5 here, so I've had to bundle up a little bit. Is it the everyday introducing of ourselves? Is it the carrying out reviews with clients or indeed colleagues of work done so as to highlight value? Is it the awkward pushback conversations? Again, you can tick more than one here. Is it the difficult pushback conversations? Is it more about momentum? That whole cluster about getting consensus and confirming agreement and keeping things moving, is that the main area of significance, particularly if you're working externally as a consultant or a external professional? Or is it the creative visioning type brainstorming conversations for the future? Thanks, David. You need to help the buyer narrow down their options. Too many, and you look confused and unfocused. Yeah, very true. Equally, I would say there's another maxim that says 2 is a dilemma, 3 is a choice. So if you really do want to give customers choice, then think about 3 rather than 2, because 2 feels like a dilemma for them.
Maybe
again,
2 is the one, John, maybe 2 is the one you... Maybe 2 is the one that
you might want to do. Exactly. Yeah. Very true. Okay, I'm about to close this. Any last minute votes? 76% of people have voted. Anyone else? 78. Go on, go for 80. We've got 80. Superb. Close. And share. So, interestingly enough, the getting consensus one rose right to the top of this pile. As did the creative brainstorming. Not surprising in view of the reshaping requirements need. See how these topics might be linked. This is particularly useful for us as we plan future webinars. Obviously, this, if you have any other suggestions, by the way, feel free to send them in. I'll put our contact details up in a moment. Yes, we will send you the slides before you all ask. The plan is to do a couple of master classes as well. Still being planned, both in London and Brussels. The key business conversations, obviously, are listed there, but we're going to try and tailor these for different audiences.
You might want to take the poll down, John.
Have I got the poll still there?
Yeah, you might just want to pull that down so people can see your slide.
I don't think I'll ever learn to do that, you know. It's so good to have a co-presenter who can actually tell you. The plan is to actually to emphasize on role play versus theory. So if we can do it properly, what we'll do is we'll download the stuff first so that there's no theory being done in the masterclass, and the actual, on the day itself, we can actually focus on role-playing, agreed role plays, rather than just doing theoretical stuff that could be done on a forum like this. Still in the planning, if you've got any thoughts on that, please help us with it. Cost will be in that ballpark, again, just to save you asking. Exact timing, not sure, probably October, November time. Certainly not before that, because we'll use the summer to plan them well. Couple of other questions, just as time allows. Is there a great question here from Dino. Is there a danger that business owner objectives are at variance with organizations such as business angels? Well, almost certainly, Dino. Almost certainly. But that's just my view. Great question, though. And again, if you have to deal with organizations where there's an investment group who may be at odds with what the operational stroke salespeople are doing, that becomes very real. As with the gentleman that I was coaching yesterday, that's precisely the dilemma that he has. So this is a very appropriate question and very real. Kevin Zwolinski, nice. Sorry, go ahead.
Could I say something quickly there, John? I've been working with a business who's got a private equity investment. And one of the things that we found work really well is to bring them together in a forum on a regular basis so that the investors and the business leaders can talk things through and in a challenging environment sometimes actually agree what their priorities are together.
Yeah. And on that very note, plus conscious of the time, Kathy has, as part of the setup for well, two interesting things happened as we were setting this up. One is we learned a lot more about GoToWebinar. The other is we actually learned that, you know, we're not necessarily totally using the same language in the same ways. You'll notice that Kathy's shaping of demand is further up the funnel. Mine is very much in the dialogue you're having around purchase intent. If the way that she's approaching this is more relevant to you, her contact details are there. You're very welcome to get in touch with her. She has also agreed as part of today to make available a consultation session to a few people, and by a few we're looking at between 3 and 8 somewhere. If you want to set that up, you're welcome to either get in touch with her directly or via me. This is something she normally only does with clients, but as part of the deal of doing this today, Kathy is happy to do that. Finally, thanks to everyone who's actually contributed today. I know there's a lot of questions we haven't covered. I'm sure that the dialogue is going to continue on afterwards. Are
there any key ones, John, that we should answer before we finish?
Well, we're out of time, so even if there are, I'm afraid we can't.
Okay.
This is a controversial one, by the way. Not everyone agrees with this. It's hotly debated. So the approach of being challenging and the approach of really pushing the client isn't for everyone. But there's more and more evidence for all the reasons covered on the call that at least you should take a good hard look at it and not let any nervousness you may have about it keep you from business growth. Wish you well as you do that. Real thanks to Kathy for not only the content today, but also the unique experience that she shares from working with sales teams. This is a very hot topic in that environment right now. Wish you a good day. Enjoy the rest of it. Bye for now.
Yeah, good day from me. Thank you very much.